Members, the Senate is now back in session. We are in the 8th extraordinary session. We have messages from the Assembly. Secretary, please read.
Mr. President, I am directed to inform your honorable body that the Assembly amended and on this day passed as amended Senate Bill 34 and respectfully request your honorable body to concur in said amendments.
Members, this is an urgency item. Senator Padilla, for what purpose do you rise, sir?
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent to take up SB 34 without reference to file.
Without objection, so ordered. Secretary will read.
Senate Bill 34 by Senator Padilla, an act relating to energy and making an appropriation therefore.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Members, this is a bill I introduced in extraordinary session to help facilitate the siting of as many as 15 renewable energy plants that are also recipients of Recovery Act dollars. Collectively, these plants represent 5,000 megawatts of renewable electricity to be added to the California grid, as well as 5,000 direct and 10,000 indirect jobs. Amendments in the Assembly refined and strengthened the in lieu fee and ex parte provisions of the bill since it came out of the Senate. Also authorizes the Department of Fish and Game to charge fees for their work to process incidental take permits. And finally, authorizes the loan of $10 million to the Department of Fish and Game so that they can immediately commence mitigation for these projects and builds in restoration of those $10 million. This group has this
Senator
bill
Padilla, one moment, please. Members. Thank you, Senator Padilla. Proceed.
The bill enjoys tremendous bipartisan support. I know we're in a hurry here, but I need to take a moment to acknowledge the tremendous help from staff. Kelly Smith at the Energy, Utilities, and Communications Committee, Bill Craven at the Natural Resources Committee, Randy Pester in Environmental Quality Committee, and of course Kip Lipper in the Pro Tem's office. Ask for your I vote.
Debate or discussion? Debate or discussion? Seeing and hearing none. Secretary, Senator Onestad.
Question of the author.
Question of the author, Senator.
Could you explain the $75,000 fee that was added in amendments over at the Senate?
There's two fees. One is an in lieu fee for mitigation because of the existence of these plants in the desert region of the state. It's voluntary, but supported by the project and the applicant community, if you will. The other $75,000 fee for Fish and Game strictly allows them, it's a temporary fee, number one, and only for these projects so that the department can process incidental take permits. It's natural course of the process here, but given the workload at the department, the urgency to act on these specific applications so that we don't miss deadlines for the Recovery Act dollars, this is an amount that will cover the expanded resource and capacity for the staff to do those permits.
Further debate or discussion? Senator Dutton.
Yeah, I'm going to encourage support of this. Primarily the fees we're talking about are of a more or less voluntary nature. It's only if you want to go forward with your projects. This will allow you an opportunity to actually expedite the process and as well received and supported by industry as well. So I'd like to encourage support of this, this very helpful bill.
Further debate or discussion, members? Seeing and hearing none, Senator Padilla, you may close.
Again, it's enjoyed tremendous bipartisan support out of this House originally and the Assembly. I ask for your I vote.
Secretary, call the roll.
Onestad? Aye. Alquist? Aye. Ashburn? Aye. Calderon? Cedillo? Aye. Cogdill? Aye. Corbett? Aye. Correa? Aye. Cox? Aye. Denham? DeSaulnier? Aye. Ducheney? Dutton? Aye. Flores? Aye. Hancock? Harmon? Aye. Hollingsworth? Aye. Huff? Aye. Kehoe? Aye. Leno? Aye. Liu? Aye. Lowenthal? Aye. Maldonado? Negrete McLeod? Aye. Oropesa? Aye. Padilla? Aye. Pavley? Aye. Price? Aye. Romero? Aye. Runner? Aye. Smidian?
Aye.
Aye. Steinberg? Aye. Strickland? Aye. Walters? Wiggins? Wolk? Aye. Wright? Aye. Wyland? Aye. Yee? Yee, aye. Mr. President, ayes 32, no 0.
Ayes 32, noes 0 on the urgency. Ayes 32, noes 0 on the bill. The bill is passed. Senator Kehoe, for what purpose do you rise?
For an announcement, Mr. President.
Proceed.
Thank you. Members and also member staff, next week we'll start our annual Nissan Retire Your Attire clothing drive. This is for Weave, to help women who are escaping domestic violence and trying to get back into the workforce. So we'll kick it off Monday, March 15th, and it will run for 2 weeks until Thursday, March 25th. And we encourage you to take us up on the offer to put a donation box outside your office and bring in gently used professional clothing for men and women to be given to survivors of domestic violence. You can contact my office for more information, but for 2 weeks, let's bring in our professional-looking clothes so people can get back to work and get back on their feet. This is 2 weeks starting Monday.
Thank you, Senator Kehoe. Members, we remain in the 8th extraordinary session. Senator Steinberg, it's my understanding that Senator Padilla's SB 34 was the last bill we're anticipating receiving in the 8th extraordinary session.
That is correct, Mr. President, and let me just say that there are a number of bills that were introduced and moved a great deal of the way through the process through the 8th extraordinary session that we assume and hope will be taken up during the regular session as well. And so I think that's appropriate time for me to request unanimous consent to take up SCR 2 without reference to committee or to file.
Without objection, SCR 2 is before the body, Senator. Secretary, please read.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 2 by Senator Steinberg relative to the final adjournment of the 2009-10 8th Extraordinary Session of the Legislature.
Thank you very much again, Mr. President. Today we shut down the 8th Extraordinary Session. I want to thank the members on both sides of the aisle and the staff for their good bipartisan work in making a beginning dent in California's budget deficit. Just to review what we accomplished in this session, we passed legislation to ensure that California has adequate cash to pay its bills this year. This is very important because it allows the state treasurer, who went out yesterday actually with a $2 billion bond sale, to continue selling bonds so that we can invest in infrastructure in California. We passed legislation that cut the deficit by $4 billion, a 20% bite out of the estimated deficit. The majority of the bills were approved with bipartisan support. We passed legislation that will create and retain more than 40,000 jobs. A number of measures ranging from providing significant tax relief for development of renewable energy projects, tax relief for victims of short sales, restructuring the governor's furlough policy, and again, critical infrastructure investments good for our economy and good for the environment. Our work is not done. The minute we adjourn this session, budget subcommittees will begin their work on addressing the remainder of the deficit. I might just add, in a time period of little good news, I was certainly heartened, as I know you were, by the state controller's announcement yesterday that cumulatively our revenue now is $2 billion above projections, with 4 months to go in the fiscal year. Third straight month of revenue gain above projections. We're not out of the woods, but between this special session, the improvement in the economy, our work back in Washington, D.C., we are now whittling down this deficit to a much more manageable number. And I'd remind you, in terms of those who might say, well, geez, what are you doing? Why aren't you addressing this? We are now members on the 80th billionth dollar of deficit reduction since December of last year. I praise the membership for their good work thus far in the session, and let us continue.
Thank you, Mr. President. Unfortunately, there is another perspective that the facts don't support the perspective of the majority party. The facts are that this is an extraordinary session that is required by the People's Action on Proposition 58 5 years ago that allows, not only allows, but actually forces the legislature to stop work on other issues in order to address a fiscal crisis. So the governor proposes and calls an extraordinary session under Proposition 58 and says, legislature, stop your work on other things because the crisis is here and we need to fix it. He identified the crisis as $6.9 billion in the current year. And the solutions that have been proposed in all reality amount to less than a third of that, about $2 billion in solutions. Now, most of what the governor proposed were the types of things that would get us out of this crisis, which is we have to reduce spending. Unfortunately, what has been sent and agreed to is about $200 million in actual spending reductions. And the rest is the type of thing that's gotten us into this problem year after year after year, which is fund shifts, papering it over, the types of things that the people can no longer stand and the budget can no longer stand. We should not be saying that the work is largely done but not finished. What we should be saying is that we have yet to even begin the serious work of taking on this current budget deficit, and we should not be closing down this extraordinary session. So I'd urge a no vote on this.
Further debate or discussion? Senator Steinberg, you may close.
This is obviously a debate that will continue throughout the course of the year, as it should. I suppose I'd like to use my very brief closing, though, just to cite from an article from one of the well-respected education trade publications by Tom Chernow, who used to write for the Chronicle, March the 9th, 2010. He reports the following, and I quote, "The U.S. Department of Education has notified the governor's office that California's application for a second phase of federal stimulus money, about $400 million, is being held up over concerns the state has not met congressional maintenance of effort requirements." Now, what does that mean? How do you translate that? Legislative ease? We cut $32.5 billion last year, including huge cuts to public education. Now, it's your perspective, respect your perspective, that we should cut even deeper, even in a way that jeopardizes our race to the top application or other opportunities for federal funds. We disagree. I urge an aye vote on closing this session.
Is there any objection to using the prior roll call? There is. Secretary, call the roll.
Onnested? No. Alquist? Aye. Ashburn? No. Calderon? Cedillo? Aye. Cogdill? No. Corbett? Aye. Correa? Cox? No. Denham? No. DeSaulnier? Aye. Ducheney? Dutton? No. Flores? Aye. Hancock? Harmon? Hollingsworth? No. Huff? No. Kehoe? Leno? Aye. Liu? Aye. Lowenthal? Aye. Maldonado? Negrete McLeod? Aye. Oropesa? Aye. Padilla? Aye. Pavley? Aye. Price? Aye. Romero? Aye. Runner? No. Smidian? Aye. Steinberg? Aye. Strickland? No. Walters? Wiggins? Wolk? Aye. Wright? Aye. Wyland? No. Yee.
Call the absent members.
Calderon? Correa? Ducheney? Hancock? Harmon? Kehoe? Maldonado? Walters? Wiggins? Yee.
Call the absent members.
Calderon? Correa? Ducheney? Hancock? Harmon? Kehoe? Maldonado? Walters? Wiggins? Yee.
Senator Steinberg moves a call. Members, we will recess the 8th extraordinary session and reconvene the regular session. Is there any further business in the regular session? Senator Lowenthal, for what purpose do you rise?
To introduce SR 34 without Teen Driver Safety Week without reference to file. Permission to take this bill up. I request permission to take the bill up without reference to file.
Senator, I'm advised by the Secretary's office that the measure is on the consent calendar. Would you like to remove it from the consent calendar for any reason?
Absolutely not. I think it's a wonderful place to land.
All right,
I
thank you.
strongly support, and I urge my colleagues to keep it on the consent calendar.
All right, thank you. Members, do we have other items on the regular session? Senator Wyland, for what purpose do you rise, sir?
Is this an appropriate time to do an adjourn in memory in the regular session?
It is, sir, under motions and resolutions. One moment, sir. Member, Senator Wyland has an adjourn in memory. Could we give him the deference of our attention, please?
This is a particularly sad case. We know about the what happened with the young woman in San Diego recently who was killed, Chelsea King. Months before that, February 2009, Amber Dubois was 14 years old, was walking to Escondido High School, the high school that I went to, and disappeared. Over those months, there were search after search after search. The parental hope and the hopes of the community that somehow she would be found. She was just recently found, her remains, several miles north of Escondido. The perpetrator of the other crime is a so-called person of interest. And, of course, we all know, as we do with the prior incident, that there can be no greater pain for a parent than to have this occur, but at least there is closure. This was a young woman who did not deserve this fate, who was innocently walking to school, Amber Dubois, and I'd like to adjourn in her memory with our prayers and condolences to her parents. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wyland. If we could ask you to both bring the name forward so that the passing can be properly memorialized, and if we could also ask you to convey the sympathy of the Senate to the friends and family of the deceased. Do we have other items on regular session? Senator Leno, for what purpose do you rise, sir?
Also to adjourn in memory.
Proceed.
Thank you. Colleagues, I would ask you to join me in adjourning today in the memory of one of California's and one of America's greatest conservationists and a former longtime president of the Sierra Club, and that would be Dr. Edgar Wayburn. He died in San Francisco just last week at the age of 103. Dr. Wayburn is credited with preserving much of the Bay Area's wilderness areas. In fact, he took the lead and spearheaded the establishment of the Point Reyes National Seashore, the nation's first metropolitan area national park. He was also very instrumental in the formation of the Golden Gate Recreational Area, which is about 200,000 acres and nearly 60 miles of shoreline along the Bay Area coast. And I'm sure many of you have been there. If you've not, it's some of the most pristine natural areas in the entire country, if not the world. He also, as the president of the Sierra Club, working with other conservationists, worked to expand Mount Tamalpais State Park in Marin County from 870 acres in 1948 to 6,300 acres in 1972. It was President Bill Clinton who awarded him the highest civilian honor of the land, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, in 1999. President Clinton said of Dr. Wayburn at the time that he has saved more of our wilderness than any other person alive. He was never a full-time activist. He was a physician and a family man, and leaves behind him 4 children and 3 grandchildren. He was once quoted as saying, "In destroying wilderness, we deny ourselves the full extent of what it means to be alive." I would ask that you join me in sending our condolences to his large surviving family, thanking him for his extraordinary efforts in his very long life.
Thank you, Senator Leno. If we could ask that you bring the name forward to the desk so that the passing can be properly memorialized, and if you would convey, please, the sympathies of the Senate to friends and family, as well as our appreciation for a lifetime of good works. Thank you, sir. Are there other items in the regular session? Senator Liu, for what purpose do you rise, Senator?
Adjourn in memory.
For an adjourn in memory, please proceed.
Nancy Berry Munger died peacefully at her home on February 6, 2010. She was 86. Nancy lived in Los Angeles her entire life. She earned a Bachelor of Arts in Economics in 1945 from Stanford University. She leaves her husband of 54 years, businessman and co-philanthropist Charles T. Munger, and 8 children of his, hers, and their marriages. Nancy served as a trustee and board president of Marlborough School, a trustee of Stanford University, a trustee of Huntington Library Art Collection and Botanical Gardens, an overseer of the Hoover Institute, and a board member of the YMCA of Metropolitan Los Angeles, and I ask we adjourn in her memory.
Thank you, Senator Liu, and again, please convey our sympathies to friends and family. Senator Oropesa, for what purpose do you rise, Senator?
Yes, I'd like to request, per the request of the author, ask that AB 898 be removed from the inactive file for the purpose of amendment.
Could you repeat the bill number, please, Senator?
Yes, AB 898.
AB 898?
Yes.
Removed from inactive?
Yes.
At the request of the author.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. Other items of business on the regular session file, members? We could ask members to be patient for just a moment with a reminder that we will be recessing the regular session and reconvening the 8th extraordinary session. Members, again, if we could just have a moment of patience while we sort out the closure of the 8th extraordinary session. Members, do we have any other business in the regular session? Senator Steinberg, we have the consent and special consent calendars in the regular session, which we might take up at this time. We also have, as you know, the need to return to the 8th extraordinary session, at which time we can either take up your SCR, which remains on call, or we can go to the ACR number 1, which has come to us from the Assembly, which is their resolution to close down the 8th extraordinary session. Senator Steinberg. We can go to consent in the regular session, which is where we are at the moment. All right. Ask the Secretary, please read.
Senate Bill 841, Senate Bill 842, and Senate Bill 843.
Members, the consent calendar contains items 26 through 28. We're going to ask the Secretary to call the roll in just a moment. We have a special consent calendar. We'd like to apply the same roll call immediately upon conclusion. If members could be keeping that in mind. On the consent calendar items, members, Secretary, call the roll.
Onnested. Aye. Alquist. Aye. Ashburn. Calderon. Cedillo. Aye. Cogdill. Aye. Corbett. Aye. Correa. Cox. Aye. Denham. Aye. DeSaulnier. Aye. Duchesne. Dutton. Aye. Flores. Aye. Hancock. Harmon. Hollingsworth. Aye. Huff. Aye. Kehoe. Leno. Aye. Liu. Aye. Lowenthal. Maldonado. Negrete McLeod. Aye. Oropesa. Aye. Padilla. Aye. Pavley. Aye. Price. Aye. Romero. Aye. Runner. Aye. Semidian. Aye. Steinberg. Aye. Strickland. Aye. Walters. Wiggins. Wolk. Aye. Wright. Aye. Wyland. Aye. Yee. Yee. Aye. Ashburn. Aye.
Call the absent members.
Calderon. Correa. Aye. Duchesne. Hancock. Harmon. Kehoe. Lowenthal. Aye. Maldonado. Walters. Wiggins. Mr. President.
Ayes 31, noes 0. The consent calendar is approved. Members, that takes us to special consent. These are items on the special consent calendar. Is there any objection to substituting the previous roll call? Seeing and hearing none, special consent is approved. Ayes 31, noes 0. Members and Senator Steinberg, that completes the business on the regular session daily file. We will now recess the regular session and reconvene the 8th extraordinary session. We are in extraordinary session. Senator Steinberg, would you like to lift the call on the SCR? No. Senator Steinberg, would you like to take up ACR 1? Senator Steinberg, we do have some members who have returned to the chambers who might be able to add on to the SCR if you'd like to take that opportunity at this time. All right. At the request of Senator Steinberg, please lift the call on SCR 2. Secretary, call the absent members.
Calderon, Correa, DeCheney, Hancock, Harmon, Kehoe, Maldonado, Walters, Wiggins, Yee. Yee, aye.
Call the absent members.
Calderon, Correa, DeCheney, Hancock, Harmon, Kehoe, Maldonado, Walters, Wiggins. Kehoe, aye. Correa, aye.
Mr. President. Going to replace the bill on call, members. The bill remains on call at the request of Senator Steinberg. Now, Senator Steinberg, for what purpose do you rise, sir?
Run up the score. Okay. Members, in our unfortunate delay, the Assembly took up the identical version of closing the session. The ACR passed and then adjourned. So if we're going to close today, as is our desire and intent, we now, despite the 21 votes on the SCR, we need to take up the ACR in order to bring our work to conclusion. So I'd like to take up ACR 1. If Dennis agrees to waive his speech, I'll waive mine, and we'll cast a vote. Okay?
Members, the item before us is ACR 1. We are in the 8th extraordinary session. Senator Steinberg, ACR 1 would close out the 8th extraordinary session. This is a 21-vote bill. Secretary, call the roll. One moment, Mr. Secretary. Members, it has been suggested that we may wish to speed the process up a little bit by substituting the roll call on the previous measure, the previous roll call on SCR 2. Members, if I could have your attention for just a moment. There is an objection. We will proceed to a roll call on ACR 1. Secretary, call the roll.
Onnested? No. Alquist? Aye. Ashburn? No. Calderon? Cedillo? Aye. Cogdill? No. Corbett? Aye. Correa? Aye. Cox? No. Denham? No. DeSaulnier? Aye. DeCheney? Dutton? No. Flores? Aye. Hancock? Harmon? Hollingsworth? No. Huff? No. Kehoe? Aye. Leno? Aye. Liu? Aye. Lowenthal? Maldonado? Negrete McLeod? Aye. Lowenthal, aye. Oropesa? Aye. Padilla? Aye. Pavley? Aye. Price? Aye. Romero? Aye. Runner? Smidian?
Aye.
Aye. Steinberg? Aye. Strickland? Walters? Wiggins? Wolk? Aye. Wright? Aye. Wyland? No. Yee? Yee, aye. Mr. President, ayes 21, noes aye.
Members, in the 8th extraordinary session, ayes 21, noes 9. The resolution is adopted. We are going to lift the call on SCR 2. We're going to call the absent members.
Calderon, DeCheney, Hancock, Harmon, Maldonado, Walters, Wiggins.
Ayes 21, noes 11. The resolution is adopted. Is there any other business pending before the 8th extraordinary session? If not, then we will. I did. Then, members, the 8th extraordinary session is is adjourned. We return to the regular session. Are there any other items in the regular session to be heard at this time, members? Senator Steinberg, if there is no other business, the desk is clear.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Session will resume Monday at 2 o'clock. Have a good weekend, everybody.
The Senate will be in recess until 3:30, at which time the adjournment motion will be made. We will reconvene Monday at 2 p.m. The Senate stands in recess.